The 2022 NHL entry draft was supposed to be the draft class of Shane Wright, but with a couple years of hindsight, the re-rankings have gone all over the place and changed their way up, and they're highlighted by Hutson and Logan Cooley.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this show, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. I'm your host, Sebastian High, the USA Scout over at Elite Prospects. And on today's episode, we're going to turn back the years a little bit. Once again, we've been looking at previous draft class a bit in the past couple of weeks here, but on today's show, we're going to do a full-on redraft of the full first round, the top 32. We're going to see which prospects crack the top 32 with hindsight for me. We're also going to be naming about 10 or so honorable mentions at the end who were very difficult to cut from this, and I wanted to just include their names to show that they were in consideration here as well. But in the first segment, we're going to look at the top 8 in this redraft from number 1, the Montreal Canadiens pick, and they end up with a player that they actually drafted themselves, just not the guy they picked at number 1. And we'll work our way down here through the top 32 here on today's episode. So I invite you to lean back, enjoy, grab something to drink and to sip on, make yourselves comfortable, and we'll jump straight into this show. But before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, the 2022 NHL Draft has this very special place in my heart. It was the first draft that I massively also published my work publicly. By the end of the draft class, I joined Dauber Prospects as well, and was able to have an influence on their final rankings just a little bit, and was pushing actually the guy at number 1 here to get as high up the board as possible. I think the highest I managed to push him was like 45th. But I was just really trying to get him up into the first round at the bare minimum, because I've been a massive fan of Hutson for a very long time. He was my 11th ranked player in this draft class, and he was one of my 2 favorites to watch in the draft. And he ended up falling to the Montreal Canadiens at 62nd overall. But I think with hindsight, it's between 2 players for this top spot, between Hutson and Logan Cooley. I'm giving it to Hutson here right now, but I think that you can make a very strong argument for Logan Cooley as well, and I'd love to hear Utah Mammoth fans as well of perhaps why you would argue in Logan Cooley's case here, because I think that there's a plethora of very fair arguments here, because Hutson is a special, offensively elite number 1 defenseman, and Logan Cooley is a special, offensively elite number 1 center. And between those two, who do you value more? I think it has a lot to do with the positions that you want to really add high up in the draft. But for Hutson, Calder winner last season, 66-point performance. He's basically at a point a game here as well to start this 2025-26 season, playing a big role with the Montreal Canadiens and leading their top power play, and it's starting to really click now that Ivan Demidov has gotten added to it. And yeah, he has 1 goal and 11 points in 12 games here so far this season, so picking up exactly where he left off. But Logan Cooley at number 2, I think he's just a player that I overlooked a little bit. I had him ranked at 4th overall. I think that was too low at the time, and also especially now with hindsight on our side. I think I had some concerns about the physical side. Is he going to be able to create down the middle of the ice? And he has shown time and time again here since being drafted that he can do just that. This is one of the best skaters in the National Hockey League already. Incredibly fluid, so skilled, does everything at high speeds, connects plays between his line mates, and is just an all-around really fantastic and fun to watch player in the offensive zone. I think that the defensive side of the game can still continue improving a little bit in the coming seasons, but it's already taken really big steps since he was drafted. So Logan Cooley was an absolute slam dunk there for the then Arizona Coyotes. And at number 3, a player that I actually ranked higher than this at number 2 and went to the Chicago Blackhawks at 13th overall, we've got Frank Nazar. Very special talent, can play center, can play wing, one of the speediest, highest motor players in this entire draft class, can execute plays at his high speeds, always working hard, always just being super intense and pesky, getting underneath opponents' sticks and under their skins, and a guy that can create just as easily through his playmaking as he can through his goal scoring. And he seems to be the future, like long-term, like dynamic duo partner for Connor Bedard there in Chicago. And he's been playing a massive role in that team so far this season, among their top 2 scorers, with, of course, Connor Bedard. So Frank Nazar keeping his spot high up on the board, and really like making me proud as someone that that had him so high up on the board in his draft year. Not many people had him top 3. And I'm glad I stuck by my guns with this player, because he's certainly a riser looking back on draft day. At number 4, we have Juraj Slafkovsky, a guy I had ranked at 5th overall, who went drafted 1st overall by the Montreal Canadiens, and a guy that I think could easily also have ended up at number 3 here in contention with Frank Nazar. Depends what kind of profile you want. I think Nazar's going to be a bit more of a play driver, a bit more of a dynamic creator long-term in the National Hockey League than Juraj Slafkovsky, but Slav has been tremendous this season with the Montreal Canadiens. His power game, his ability to play down the middle of the ice, to win battles along the boards. He's winning his battles at an incredibly high rate and has been a possession monster for the Habs here in recent years, and integral in opening up space and time and getting the puck to both Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki to leverage their elite offensive minds and talents. And I think that he's just a fantastic fit in Montreal, and I don't think that the Habs are regretting that selection in any way, shape, or form right now. At number 5, we have the player that did get drafted at 5th overall, and that's Cutter Gauthier, now of the Anaheim Ducks, selected by the Philadelphia Flyers, and he's been off to a fantastic start to his National Hockey League career, especially as a goal scorer. Really just like shooting pucks into the net here this season. He's already up to 7 goals and 12 points in 11 games this campaign. He scored 20 goals and 44 points last season, and he's a guy I was too low on back in his draft year. I had him ranked down in the mid-20s at 24th overall. I just had some doubts, and basically every single doubt I had has been quelled since then, and he's just proving me wrong at every turn and vindicating the draft selection that he ended up earning there in the top 5. Just unfortunate for the Flyers that he's not doing this with the Broad Street Bullies. But moving on, we've got Shane Wright at number 6, a player I still like a lot and had been my number 1 player in this draft class. Like most people, I think, especially in the public sector, had Shane Wright ranked at number 1, and he's really starting to catch some form with the Seattle Kraken, and especially in a two-way capacity as a one-touch offensive creator. His shot is a threat. His playmaking and vision are really strong. He has 3 goals and 6 points so far this season in 11 games, and last year really had his NHL breakout with 19 goals and 44 points in 79 games. I don't think he's going to be an elite offensive scorer in the National Hockey League, like pushing like 80, 90 points. I just don't think that that's the game that he's really trending towards. I think you're talking more about a 65-point, like two-way phenomenon who thinks the game at a really high level and makes the players around him better. And I think in like the mid of the top 10 is a very like solid range for a player of this style. Then at number 7, we have Simon Nemec of the New Jersey Devils. I think there's also arguments for him as high as number 5 here on my board. He's really picking up steam with the Devils here this season, and a guy whose intelligence has always been the biggest marker of his game. He's a fluid skater, but it's that IQ, the decision making, especially with the puck on his stick, that really opens up so many chances for him. And he's playing like a third pairing role mostly this season in terms of deployment, but also getting some second pairing opportunities. And he has 7 assists in 13 games here this campaign. I think with his IQ, this is a guy that could push to be a top pairing guy when he hits his ceiling. I just think it still might take another 3 or 4 years for him to get to that level, especially in an organization like the Devils. And to wrap up this first segment, we have another right shot defenseman, this time a massive riser on the board, and that is of the Chicago Blackhawks, Sam Rinzel, player who was selected at 25th overall. I had him ranked way lower than that at 46th. I was massively spooked by how chaotic he was, trying loads of things, seeing what would stick. And I was really, really put off in many ways by how immature I think his style was in his draft year campaign. I mean, of course, this was a high school player playing some minutes in the USHL and struggling mightily defensively there. But then every season in the NCAA, he was adding tools to his toolkit, really, especially on the defensive side of the puck, and gaining confidence and also some poise in the offensive zone with what he actually tried. And those early years of experimentation just really opened up so much for him. And that's a learning process for me as a scout, is seeing a player that's trying everything and not much is working, but they're trying everything, how that could still be something that leads to a really high-end projection a few years after the draft class. And Sam Renzel has been proving me wrong time and time again. He's become one of my favorite players from this class to watch in the National Hockey League, and I think that the Blackhawks have an absolute gem on their hands here, and he will certainly be pushing Artem Levshunov for that first pairing right shot defenseman role for a very long time into the future. But that wraps up this first segment. In the next one, we'll keep clocking through the middle of the draft class between players at number 9 all the way through 20. But before we do that, a quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine all of your live bets into a same game parlay for an even bigger shot at a massive payout. It keeps every single game exciting, especially when your team is making that big late push. Those same game parlays are one of my favorite ways to play, as they allow me to take multiple swings on different players from my favorite team who are just in hot form recently, or who I expect to have a big comeback performance, and it just makes the action all the more enthralling. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and property investments, it's so easy to lose track. And that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or even on your phone. It helps me organize all of my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without ever needing to touch a single spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunity pass you by. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, let's keep this episode rolling here in the second segment as we're talking about the mid-range of the first round here, and guys that we're going to look at some risers, some fallers, and everything in between, as we have a lot of players that have already made their starts in the National Hockey League, have either already locked down roster spots or are right on the cusp of really making that jump. So kind of, I think, a separator between like the elite of this draft class of like 3 years with hindsight and the guys that are still kind of fighting to make their way into there. But one exception to that category might be the first player we're talking about here. And we ended the first segment with Sam Renzel, a Chaska, Minnesota high school alum. And we begin the second segment with another graduate of Chaska High and a native of Chaska, Minnesota. And that is Jimmy Snuggerud of the St. Louis Blues, a really great player that I love watching with his motor, his intensity, his versatility. He helps his team in all three zones. He has a good shot, good release, but it's that vision as a playmaker that I still think is so underrated in his game, just as I did in his draft year. But mind you, I was way too low on his actual projection. He was part of a really big tier I had in this draft between 21st overall and 37th. And in the end, I sorted it in a way that he ended up at 36th on my board. St. Louis ended up snapping him up at 23rd overall and are making out like bandits. This guy here is at number 9 here on my redraft board. He's looking great so far in his young NHL career on a struggling St. Louis Blues lineup to start the campaign. But he's a guy I think that is just tailor-made for the National Hockey League and is off to a great start to his young career. At number 10, we've got Denton Mateychuk of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Item ranked at 8th overall. He ended up being selected at 12th by Columbus. And this guy, with his mobility, with his overall adaptability, the offensive activations, the aggression he plays with, and the mobility he has to then make up ground when when play gets past him defensively, I think really combined for a really special talent and a guy that I just so enjoy watching play, and a player that has really taken some big steps in his development to round out his game, play a bit more actively on the physical side of things, and he's been rewarded. I mean, so far this season, he's played every game with the Blue Jackets. 12 games, 3 goals, 5 points after playing 45 games last season and getting 13 points. He's well on his way to bursting through that mark, and he's a player that I think is earning more and more trust, and for very good reason. At number 11 in our redraft board, we're heading to Detroit as we have Marco Kasper, player selected at 8th overall. I had him ranked 22nd overall, clearly falling much closer to his NHL valuation than my own with hindsight here. And he's just such a plug and play player. Like, you put him on any line, he's going to offer you intensity, ferocity, net front ability, playing in the dirty areas with such like vicious ability, but also a lot of skill. And the pace of play with this guy is just so incessant. I think that the overall puck skills, the ability to create offense, was just a lot better than I valued in his draft year. I think I just saw him as a pure checker and ranked him accordingly. But I think with hindsight here, this is definitely a player with significant upside down the road, and a guy that Detroit is very happy to have in their lineup. And overall, I think that this was a pretty astute selection by the Red Wings back in 2022, even though I viewed it as a reach at the time. At number 12, we have a somewhat similar style of player in Logan Cooley of the Buffalo Sabres, a guy that got selected at 28th overall. I had him ranked in the exact same range at 29th. And this is a guy that can play center or wing, might be more of a winger here in the National Hockey League, but he brings really well-developed two-way instincts. I think the defensive side of the game, the activity, the engagement, the timing of when he does end up trying to close his gaps is all really mature for his age, but it's really offensively that booming one-timer is a massive threat that can be used on the power play or at even strength. He plays well in the middle of the ice. He gets to the dirty areas. He's able to resist contact physically. And overall, he's made for the modern National Hockey League and is making the Sabres look very good with that swing. Then at number 13, we've got Pavel Mintyukov of the Anaheim Ducks. A guy I had ranked at number 9, was selected at number 10, and is staying in a similar range, though is dropping a little bit here as he's struggled to kind of make his mark and cement a top 4 spot in Anaheim. I think that coaching has maybe held him back a little bit, as I also heard from my Anaheim Ducks friends, fan friends. And overall, I think that with Mintyukov, you just have a basis of a combination of offensive intuition and mobility and physical frame. That's just going to be too good at the end of the day to not hit. So I'm still banking on him making things work, but there's a bit more tentativeness and concern, I think, now than I had on draft day. I thought he was just a slam dunk top 4 NHL defenseman, potentially top pairing guy. I think that's slipping down now to just like a fairly likely top 4 piece at his peak, but the likelihood has dropped a bit, and the upside, I think, is also narrowing a little bit, especially with Jackson Lacombe above him in the depth chart. Then at number 14, we got another blue liner with David Jiricek, a guy that was drafted and who I had ranked both at 6th overall, now falling to 14th. And a guy that still has such special qualities in terms of the offensive intelligence, the ability to make things happen with the puck on his stick, the physical frame, the aggression, but it's just still a very raw player. And we've seen this. I mean, it's been difficult for Jiricek to kind of cement his spot in the Minnesota lineup ever since being traded there by the Columbus Blue Jackets last season. And I still think that he's a guy that will eventually make his mark, but currently he's just a sheltered third pairing right shot D in the National Hockey League, and has only gotten 1 point to his name this season, and it came in the only game he was sent down to the AHL for with the Iowa Wild. So definitely still taking some time to kind of find his footing as an offensive creator from the blue line in the National Hockey League, but I still think he has a shot of hitting it. It's just decreasing by the day. Then at number 15, we've got Jonathan Lekkerimäki of the Vancouver Canucks, the sniper, the sniping winger. Guy that was selected at exactly this slot at 15th overall. I had him ranked lower at 26th. I think in terms of the reasons that I have him higher now than I did on draft day, I've seen a lot of progression with this player in the way to blend handling skill and goal scoring and be a lot more versatile in the offensive zone with his toolkit. The shot is still the best quality, but it's no longer what I find to be the only quality. And that makes a big difference in terms of making defenders second guess. And I think that Lekkerimäki has a lot of potential to be a massive power play one-timer threat here for the Vancouver Canucks as soon as this season. Genuinely, he has the skill to do so. He's only gotten into 4 games. He's scored 1 goal in that span, playing small minutes overall, but definitely a player that I want to see succeed. I think he's really entertaining when he's at his best because he can just be automatic as a shooter, but still a guy that I think has to take that final step to really confirm all this excitement that's been bubbling up about his overall projection. But to wrap up this segment, we're cutting it shorter because I'm over time. Going to have to do a rapid fire thing for the final segment with the back half of the first round. But we've got Noah Östlund of the Buffalo Sabres. I had him ranked 7th overall. He went 16th. I had him ranked a bit too high, but he's staying still in this range. He's a very intelligent player, looking very good with the Rochester Americans in the AHL, and he's just such a line elevator, so intelligent, great playmaker, very hardworking, defensively competent, does everything that you could ask of him for an undersized centerman to do while still excelling down the middle of the ice. And I see him as a guy that could still push for a really impactful middle 6 slot for the Buffalo Sabres. I just don't see the same top line upside that I saw in flashes in his draft year campaign. But that wraps things up here for our second segment. In the final one, we're going to wrap up the show in a rapid fire. But before we do that, quick message from our sponsors here at Locked On NHL Prospects. Hockey season is officially here, and nothing beats getting into the arena for those opening night games. But let's be real, getting tickets can be such a massive headache. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices that jump right before checkout, it's so easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. And that's where Gametime comes in. The app that gives fans the advantage is your ultimate life hack for scoring amazing NHL tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I recently used Gametime to grab seats for a Habs game here in Montreal, and it just couldn't have been any simpler. I had great seats in minutes, and I'm looking forward to going to that game on Tuesday night. Their zone deals are such a game changer. You pick the section, Gametime picks your seats, and you save big. You can even find NHL tickets for under $25. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. All righty, let's wrap up this lengthy show that's going to run over time because I like all these prospects and I am talking a bit too long on each of them. But overall, this is a fun draft class, and we're going to keep talking about players that have either grown on me or I've been really high on for quite a long time. And we'll start off with one of those, with Seamus Casey at number 17 here in our re-rankings. And he's a guy I had right at 16th overall. So right here in the middle of the first round, just as he was back in 2022 for me. And he fell all the way to 46 for the New Jersey Devils. But with his mobility, the puck moving skill, he's been really strong in his production and his overall two-way impact in the AHL there with the Utica Comets, and a player that I adore watching. He's so intelligent in his offensive activations, very creative, has strong vision as a playmaker. And I think that he's just going to be a fantastic, like second pairing, maybe third pairing if they're really spoiled for talent, puck mover for the Devils here down the stretch. And he could even play that role by the tail end of this season. I think he's getting quite close to being NHL ready. But of course, if the Devils keep dominating the National Hockey League, they may be a little bit hesitant to throw a rookie into the mix. But overall, I really think that Casey is a strong talent who's progressed massively. And at 18, we've got Danila Yurov of the Minnesota Wild. I had him ranked at 20th. He was drafted at 24th. Really strong two-way player, reads the game well. He's got intelligence and vision and a good work ethic. And I think that he's just tailor-made for a third-line role here in the National Hockey League. Maybe he'd stretch that upside to a second-line capacity down the line, but for the time being, I really do just see him as a third-line kind of projection. And he's looked pretty good so far in the National Hockey League games I've caught of his this season, and a guy that I think Minnesota is quite happy to have in their lineup. At number 19, we're heading to Tampa because we've got Connor Geekie, who they got in that Mikhail Sergachev trade with the Utah Mammoth. And I had him ranked very low in his draft year, 31st overall. He was selected at number 11, and with hindsight, it falls somewhere in between, as many things do. He's intense. He's really improved his skating, which was by far the biggest weakness in his draft year. The vision and power combination as a power playmaker remains his really big strength, and I think that especially over time, as the big-time scorers in Tampa end up aging out and maybe get moved, I think that he's going to be one of the players to really take on that mantle and start scoring in a second line capacity, hopefully down the line. But he has a great fallback game as just a third line checker, as he's been playing much of this season. And overall, I think he's very impressive. He's gotten a bit of a stint in the AHL as well. 5 games, 7 points, looks really dominant against that level of competition. Just needs to kind of bring that scoring as well to the NHL once he gets bigger minutes. Then at number 20, we're going to Dallas with Leon Bichsel. The big, heavy, mobile defensive defenseman has just been a riser here. Was drafted 18th overall, so maybe not a riser in the sense of what the Dallas Stars see in him, but for me personally, he certainly has been. I had him ranked at 34th overall in his draft year. I liked all of these same elements. I just thought that the upside was more of a third pairing role rather than a second pairing guy long term, and that makes a really big difference here in valuation. So Leon Bichsel has a really special combination, and I think that he's a great fit in Dallas and is going to really support the way that they want to defend, especially come playoff time. At 21, we're sticking to the blue line with Tristan Luneau of the Anaheim Ducks, the former player of the Gatineau Olympique. I watched him a lot live in his draft year, and I struggled a lot with him. I had him ranked at 66th overall, which was even lower than he was selected at 53. I loved the skating, and everything else was a question mark to me. He wasn't dynamic offensively. He wasn't punishing defensively. I was just wondering where's this player going to go? But it's been the intelligence and the ability to learn and expand his game that has really just continuously had him bumping up here in a re-ranking order for me personally. And I've been very impressed with his showing both in the AHL and the National Hockey League in the Anaheim Ducks organization. I think that he's a really good shot at being a second pairing guy on this team, especially in a lineup lacking right shot pieces. At number 22 and 23, we've got a pair of Edmonton Oilers, as we have Isaac Howard and Matthew Savoie, who I both had ranked in that like 10 to 22 range. I had Isaac Howard, who's my number 22 ranked player here in the redraft, right at 21, so staying in the exact same range, and he fell to 31 to the Tampa Bay Lightning in his draft year. I still have the same qualms I did then. I don't think he's very engaged defensively. I think he's got some issues in terms of the two-way engagement, and he hasn't been the most effective bottom six piece in Edmonton so far this season, which is where he's being deployed. I think he's really at his best playing at speed as a playmaker, as just a pace-pushing winger who's given the reins to like lose possession a fair amount of times, but create and try big things every time he's on puck. And I see the same kind of style of player now as I did then. He's just gotten better at the things he's good at and a little bit better at the things he's less good at. With Matthew Savoie, kind of similar, I think, as well. Undersized guy, struggles to get involved physically in the middle lane, especially in his own end. And a player that can create through strong playmaking ability. It's more a question of, can he focus on creating towards the slot and the dangerous areas and really resist contact at this level. Is taking him some time, but just like Ike Howard is really playing a bottom six role much of this season so far with Edmonton in terms of minutes. And I know some games he's been playing higher up the lineup, but in terms of opportunity and ice time, he's still being managed very carefully there. And I see him also as a third line playmaker, I think, here in terms of projection down the line. At 24, we've got Rutger McGrory McGroarty of the Pittsburgh Penguins, formerly selected by the Winnipeg Jets at 14th overall. I had him right at 37. And I think he's a guy that is incredibly intelligent. The skating remains a weakness, but really clever player on the ice, has a good shot from scoring from short to medium range, especially from the bumper position on the power play, and a guy that can do some of that dirty work. He plays with some feistiness and some fire, and I think he's fitting in nicely with the Penguins, but I don't think he's a game-changing, game-breaking talent either. So I think that this back half of the first is kind of the range for McGroarty. At 25, we've got Owen Pickering staying with the Pittsburgh Penguins. I had him ranked at 27th. He was selected at 21. And he's a guy that's really growing into his frame, had a massive growth spurt before the draft. And the Penguins were really swinging on him, developing more and expanding his game as he got more comfortable in his body. And I think he's been doing that decently well since being selected. And he's solid defensively, good stick work. He uses his frame and reach really well to angle players to the outside. And I think that defensive impact is going to be a valuable piece for this Penguins lineup once they end up making the step out of the rebuilding stage, which they're seemingly entering, as we thought at the beginning of the year. But right now, they're just winning and winning and winning more games, which we'll be discussing on tomorrow's episode. As a little teaser here, it's all Pittsburgh Penguins themed tomorrow. But moving on here, we've got Owen Beck at 26th overall in the redraft of the Montreal Canadiens, selected at 33rd overall. Item ranked 23rd. Very intelligent two-way center, hard-working, good skater, does all the details really well, got a decent shot in the offensive zone, not special or dynamic in terms of his engagements there, but a guy that just drives play, makes his teammates better, supports them in every single zone of the ice, and I think is just going to be a shoe-in, valuable, the bottom six piece in Montreal long-term. The question is just when is he going to be able to make that jump, and who is he going to bump out of the lineup? Because Oliver Kapanen has locked down his spot in the National Hockey League so far this season. And of course, you have guys like Josh Anderson and Brendan Gallagher still under big contracts for 2 more years. And very curious to kind of see what ends up happening there with the Habs asset management in the depth of their lineup. At number 27, we're heading to Minnesota with Liam Ergren, the third player of that Jurgen trio. We already talked about Lek Karamaki and Noah Östlund, but Liam Ergren, I liked a lot in this draft. I had him ranked 14th overall. Was selected at number 19 by the Minnesota Wild, and the draft pick also in part of that Kevin Fiala return, where, of course, Brock Faber was the big gem that they landed in that deal. But Liam Ergren is also a very projectable guy. I think he'll definitely be a bottom six NHLer for a very long time, hopefully as a third liner. Got a really good shot, very hardworking, very middle-driven, very defensively competent, has a lot of leadership capabilities. I think he's a guy that, is taking some time to get to that level, but once he's there, he's going to lock that spot down for ages there in Minnesota. Then we've got Elias Salomonsson at number 28 from the Winnipeg Jets. I had him ranked at 54th overall. He got selected at 55th. So right in that same range towards the back half of the second round. And he has just kept on improving. That mobility is a massive advantage at every level he plays at. The defensive stick has gotten suffocating, very effective defensively. He was a very chaotic, offensively leaning guy in his D-1 season. And ever since then has just been changing his game a bit more every single year to being much more solid, less spectacular, but much more projectable. And I think he's going to be an important piece for Winnipeg for some years to come. We're sticking with a defensive defenseman at number 29 as we have Maverick Lamoureux from the Utah Mammoth, the big, massive right shot defenseman, so rangy, 6'7", takes up so much space and just suffocates plays time and time again against the rush. And I have my doubts about him. I had him ranked 74th overall, and he was selected exactly at this slot at number 29 by the Arizona Coyotes. And I think that they've been vindicated from that selection because, he's just taking some really nice steps in his development, and overall is a player that I would want on my team at this stage. At number 30, we've got Kevin Korchinski, another guy I had ranked at exactly this slot in his draft year at number 30. And he got drafted at 7th overall by the Chicago Blackhawks. He's a guy that moves incredibly well, shows these flashes of high-end offense. It's just, I'm struggling to see how it all comes together. He struggled in the National Hockey League where when he's played there in his first couple seasons in pro hockey, and overall I think is better suited for the AHL at this point in his development. And he's looking good in some games, a bit more tenuous in others, but is definitely a player I think that still has upside to make me look bad with my ranking. I'm not at the point now of changing my mind in terms of him being exciting but difficult in his projection and a bit too chaotic for my liking. But the Blackhawks are hopefully going to get a good asset out of this patient development. I wonder where he settles in the lineup and what role he fills, especially with the power play roles being taken up by guys like Levshinov and Sam Renzel down the line. At number 31, we have Jagger Firkus of the Seattle Kraken, a player I adored in this draft year. I had him ranked all the way up at number 13, and Seattle got him more in this range of the draft at number 35. Still a player I think has so many special qualities about him. He has a wicked shot, very intelligent, thinks the game very quickly, very strong playmaking vision as well, and a player that works very, very hard. He's a very good skater. He's got all these assets on his side, but the frame is something to be concerned about, and it was during the draft, and I think I undervalued that element a little bit, but still, player who's gotten off to a great start this season in the AHL with Coachella Valley. 3 goals, 7 points through 8 games this season. And he's a guy I have a lot of respect for in terms of the way he approaches hockey. It should be of note that, he has 7 points in 8 games, but those points have only come in 3 games. He had 2 3-point performances. So when he's hot, he's blistering. But the question here is consistency and getting into the score sheet time and time again. But still, he does lead his team in points. So something to keep note of, but might still need another 2 or maybe even 3 years to develop into a night in, night out NHL talent. To wrap up the top 32, we've got a player I had ranked all the way up at 3rd overall, got drafted at 30th, and of course I'm talking about Brad Lambert of the Winnipeg Jets. Incredible skater, so fluid, so speedy, so much to love, especially in his draft year, and I put so much weight in those mechanics that I think I overlooked a lot of the supporting elements a little bit too much. I mean, having him ranked over Logan Cooley is a bit disastrous in hindsight, but definitely a good learning experience for myself, and a player that now seems a bit more fit for a checking role, providing depth offense rather than a true line driver in a top 6, like I thought he might become in his draft year's season. But definitely a guy that still has all the tools to make it work, but just cementing his spot in the National Hockey League has been difficult. Of course, it being the Winnipeg Jets makes it harder. This is a very deep and strong team, but I want to see what he looks like when he's actually playing big-time NHL minutes. But the production has been stagnating in the AHL, and he seems to be focusing more on the checking aspects than the goal scoring or the playmaking, which made him so intriguing to me as a draft eligible prospect, and a guy that I wish to see kind of make up ground in his development. And but so far this season, he's played 3 NHL games here recently, just scored his first goal of the season and of his National Hockey League career against the Pittsburgh Penguins in a 5-2 victory last night. On Saturday night, my bad. But definitely a faller big time for me in my personal rankings here, looking back on draft day. But that is it for the top 32. I just want to hit through some honorable mentions here because there's so many more names in contention that I want to give shout outs to because they have deserving arguments to be not just on my board, but even as high as like 25th overall. So please let me know in the comments down below who I missed, who I was too low on. But my HMs here are Ivan Miroshnichenko of the Washington Capitals, Elias Pettersson, the defenseman from the Vancouver Canucks, Joakim Kamel, the sniping right shot winger from the Nashville Predators, Alex Bump of the Philadelphia Flyers, Ryan Green, really solid, heavy two-way winger from the Chicago Blackhawks, Matthew Poitras from the Boston Bruins, Luca Del Bel-Belluz of the Columbus Blue Jackets, Philip Biestet of the Seattle Kraken. And Kraken fans, let me know, would you have him ranked higher than Jagger Firkus so far right now, especially since he's playing NHL minutes today? Or do you agree with me that Firkus has the higher upside between this pairing? Isaiah George, who I had ranked in the first round, and I really wanted to actually shoehorn into the end of the first round here as well, of the New York Islanders, big, heavy, intelligent defensive defenseman. Fraser Minton of the Boston Bruins, another guy that has many arguments to crack the top 32 here. And last but not least, Victor Mancini of the Vancouver Canucks, intelligent defensive defenseman as a right shot. A lot to like here. But yeah, let me know what I missed. Let me know what I hit here in this redraft. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. But that is it here for us today. If you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please do make sure to make us your first listen of the day. It's always greatly appreciated. And for your second listen, please do head on over to Locked On Fantasy Hockey, where Flip and Steel break down everything that there is to know to build yourself your most consistent, sustainable, and overall dominant fantasy roster that you can imagine. And yeah, that is it here for us today. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Sebastian High, and I hope to catch you listening again very, very soon.